Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I know it's a weeknight and it's your free time, so really appreciate all of you spending the evening with Miles and Ian and I. So, like Ian said, he had asked me to come in and give a presentation about d3.legend, which is a component for D3 that I released probably about a month ago now. So real quick, a little bit about myself. My name's Susie, and I'm currently a senior data visualization engineer at Netflix. A little bit about my background. I am completely self-taught, as I'm sure most of you are right now, and in the area of data visualization. I've been learning about it for the last 3 or 4 years. I enjoy both the design side and the programming side of the data visualization problems, and I'm pretty excited because Miles's talk, a lot of those points actually are really echoed in my talk, so it'll be a great companion to what he's already said tonight. So let's start at the beginning. Why are legends important? So this might seem really straightforward, and I think for me, the biggest reason is you have empathy for your audience. A lot of times people say, add a legend because it's a best practice or it's something you do in UI, but I think the underlying reason for why is you have empathy for your audience. You're putting something out there and you want people to receive it. You want people to feel like it's accessible, and this is one of the things you should do for your audience to make it more accessible. The second one, which some of Miles's examples showed, which was filtering your data. So a visual filter where you hover over an item in the legend, and then in the visualization itself, it then filters the data for you. So it's just another way to view your data to allow exploration and interactivity. And the third reason is it's essential for custom visualization types. So what I mean by that is people such as Stephanie Posavec or Georgia Lupi, a lot of their work is very custom. If I just showed this to you, you might not even think it was data-driven. Without that legend there, you don't know what the stems or the leaves or the little lines might mean, but really it's a representation of text of a book. And without a legend, you wouldn't understand how to read this data. So then, when I'm looking on the web at examples, even at examples that have been published in books, a lot of times I'll see visualizations without legends. So why is that? I think it's because making them can sometimes feel like this, right? Oh, that's interesting. No, wait, the other thing, tedious. It's really tedious. It takes a lot of time at the end, and it's not the interesting part of what you're trying to make, right? But I think it should be. I think it should be easy, is what I'm saying, is that you've learned D3, you've used scales to make your visualization. Why not use those scales to make those legends as well, right? And over the course of the last 3 or 4 projects that I've had at work, I've run into this problem of, oh, I made this cool visualization, and now I have to trudge through making a legend. Oh, I made this cool visualization, et cetera, right? So to me, it'd been kind of in the back of my mind, how can I make this workflow easier? How can I make it less painful for myself? Because a lot of times it feels like I'm working on my code. It's like, how about no? No, let's just wait a second. You're going too fast. Got to do this legend. And it shouldn't feel that way. So I put together this component. It's called d3.legend. You can access it at d3.legend.susielu.com, and it's on GitHub, open sourced. And here's an example of one of the legends. So yeah, the coloring is kind of off, but basically, you can write your code, and this part essentially is adding the legend component, right? Which is as simple and straightforward as I think it should be. And when I went through the process of designing it, I put together 3 different types of legends. So this is the first one. It's a color legend. This is the second one, a size legend. And similar, the main concept behind it is similar. So what basically you're doing is you have this linear size scale that you've added theoretically into your visualization somewhere to size circles in your visualization. And you're passing the scale into the legend as one of the parameters. And it's using that scale, the same domain and range you gave it, to essentially automatically generate the legend. And so there's a lot more options than the ones that I'm showing right here, but that's the overall gist of it. So the last example is a symbol legend. This one's slightly longer just because I wasn't sure if people understood what the paths looked like when you're using SVG symbol in D3, but very similar layout, very similar use as the color legend and the size legend. All these examples are on that website I had earlier. If you even just search for D3 legend, you'll be able to find the page. So there's probably 10 examples that you can look at on the website itself. And this is just a quick chart. Not all of the functionality or options are available for all three types of legends. And so this is just a quick reference chart if you're using it to know what works with what. Oh, and there's actually a point on here that I wanted to mention. So that second point I said earlier about why I use legends, and one of those was filtering. So one of the features in the legend is this on configuration. And I don't know if many of you have used it before, but basically the legend will then fire events that you can attach different interactions to. So it allows you to do that. If you hover over this thing in my legend, then you can trigger this other thing to happen in your visualization. So that's how you would have the interactivity work if you're trying to use this legend component.
Would you add a callback effectively to the on element?
Yeah, it works similar to it's basically the same as how the other on components work in D3. So if you're like on hover, do this thing. It's the same thing. It just has its own custom event types that you can bind to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right, so the overall library is pretty simple. I'm here for questions later on if you have any questions and trying to use it. And people have been commenting on GitHub, putting out requests and stuff, so feel free to reach out to me that way later on if you're working with it and run into any issues. Okay, I want to talk about another component of this, which is releasing your code into the wild. So for me, this was my very first project that I had open sourced. And I just wanted to kind of share that experience with you, hopefully as a point of encouragement if this is something you're interested in doing yourself. Okay, so to start off, it's what should I make? How did I come up with the idea of doing a legend? And I talked briefly about this is an issue I had run into over and over. So thinking about your own workflow, are there areas that you can make faster, make more efficient? And I would start off with something that just helps your own workflow. And then think about, is this useful? Ask your friends, ask people in other companies, is this something you would use? And for the legend, it was like, yeah, I know there's libraries out there, but there isn't one that I've really stuck with or wanted to use. So that was a sign to me that it was something that the community might need. And then is anyone going to notice I put all this time into something? What if it doesn't matter, right? And I don't have a good answer for this one, and you should make it for yourself, but there are a couple things in this process that I did that I think made it easier for people to adopt or people to get interested in it, and I'll share those with you. The first one is finding your community. I think Twitter is a great way to find other people in the data visualization community to follow, and that was a really big launching pad for this project itself. So highly recommend Twitter. If you don't have an account already, start following people and adding people in there. And then documentation, all of the options are documented. Like I wanted people to go to this, and I essentially copied the same format that D3 uses for documentation. So I wanted it to be accessible, to be recognizable. And finally, pictures help, even if it's just one. And this was an example, one of my coworkers, Elijah, he said, well, why don't you put a picture together? And it's just something so simple, yet if you put this out, it's a way to draw people in. Like, oh, this is a very quick summary of what I'm talking about. It was funny, the D3 legend was posted on some forum, and there was some comment in there, and it was without the picture, and some comment in there, and this guy had said, oh, man, did anyone else think that this was going to be a post about legends in D3, like the best people in D3? And I was like, oh, man, my component isn't that awesome, but other type of legend, right? So just having people understand immediately what you're talking about, what you're building, and they can then dig deeper if they're interested in it. And then my final point was, do I write bad code, right? Being self-taught, before my current job at Netflix, I hadn't worked in a team where I was working with other JavaScript developers. So it's like, who do I compare myself with? Am I even doing this right? And first off, I would say don't let that stop you, but do your research, right? And what I mean by that is no one has come up to me and been like, oh, your code was horrible. Thanks for making this thing, but you should really clean it up. Like, no one's going to really say that to you, I guess. No one's that mean. But you can follow best practices. Like, when I was doing my research, I looked at how is something similar in D3 made? Like, how are scales? How is Bostock making scales, right? There's this great post by him about making reusable charts. And that's the pattern that I followed for the legend, because I just thought, like, I need to figure out some kind of pattern. There's definitely reusable components. It started off as one legend, and then it broke itself out into a size legend, a color legend, and a symbol legend, because I saw there were nuances in the different options and how to deal with them, yet there was also reusable code that could be broken out into a separate component. So I think one of the signals of, is my code doing all right, is, people asking for features, making their own pull requests, right? Like, I was so excited when someone was like, I made this thing, and I want to add it to your component, and here's the code already. And it was not only, oh, awesome, I don't have to write that, but even more awesome, you thought you could add it yourself, and you didn't even have to ask me, like, where should I put this, right? So those are all exciting things that I think if you guys are interested in writing your own components, it's relatively rewarding. It's very rewarding. And I just want to end on this point, which is that legends are really a small step towards a larger topic that I want to open up to the community and would love people to start thinking about. And it's this concept of annotation. So if you think of what a legend is, you're really saying, like, all these things that are this color, for example, have some shared meaning, and all these things of another color have a shared meaning. And instead of having to draw lines and little notes next to every single point, a legend is a really nice way to summarize that annotation, right? And when I say annotation, initially you probably think of something more complicated. Miles had showed this example earlier, but these annotated points, interesting points in one of the visualizations that you're making. And so I'm not convinced that there isn't a more generalizable way to attack this problem. And I think it would really open up the data visualization world, because I think a lot of visualizations would be much stronger with annotation. There's just not an easy way to put those together. So for me, I guess on my ending note is just opening that up to you as the audience, as something to think about. Is it something you're interested in working on? I know Elijah and I come back to this every once in a while and talk about it. So I think it's really interesting, and basically just keeping the door open for more things to build off of legends and annotations, and how do we make the community and the tools that we use better. And that's it. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
So I have two questions. One, do you think we could find a way to get this to be part of the bundled D3 core? Because we've got that separated module version of D3 coming out. It'd be awesome to get that under D3. Two, the other question I had was the size question that you had. Yeah. It was interesting that the size got bigger and the position got farther. Yeah. How the heck did you build that?
Okay, so the first question, really interesting. Elijah started a D3 Slack channel that's open to anyone. So if you find him on Twitter, shoot him a message if you want to be part of it. And Bostock was in there in like the first days of it. And Elijah asked him, is this going to be part of D3 core? And he was like, basically the point of his rewrite for V4 of D3 is everything's going to be modules. So you can add whatever modules you want to. And Elijah was snarky enough to say, well, your opinion matters. Like, if you bring it into the core, like, that means something. But I think the conversation ended there. So I don't know where that's going to go. Second question is, I was like pretty excited when I thought of this. But basically, when you make shapes in SVG, they are rectangles or circles or paths. And there's a concept of a bounding box around them. So I basically, for whatever shape you put in there, which is why you can put different symbols, whatever symbol you want for the symbol legend, it goes and finds that bounding box, which essentially draws a rectangle around that shape and gives the width and the height. And so that's what I use to determine the positioning of the labels. Yeah.
I found that legend also has a legend component. Is there a different work with this?
I think as anything is, it's just people build off each other to make improvements on things. And it was just me building off of something I've seen others in the community, but I was like, well, what if I want to add a shape to this or a path there were more features that I wanted. And so it was just my own approach to it. I don't think it's one versus the other, but I think it's just people in the community building off each other. Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, when you say annotations as a larger issue,
yeah.
What are some of the things that you're thinking about, like text snippets on top of the visualization or other things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to like confine it to just text snippets if you can think of more innovative ways to annotate things. But that's my initial, I think that's the default thought of, at my current job, I work a lot with analysts, right? Like, we make visualizations, but we're not actually the consumers of those visualizations. It's other people, and they want to share insights that they found with their team, right? So wouldn't it be neat if they could just annotate this or that instead of having to say, well, look at this point, or like taking all these screenshots and making comments and pasting everything in Google Docs. It's like, can't we just have a platform where it's much easier to understand these things? So that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from it, but I think it's a more general problem.
I just want to expand on that a little bit. One type of annotation that I've seen used pretty effectively but not enough is actually annotating the fact that something is interactive, kind of tying the two talks together, right? Yeah. So a lot of these new visualizations, you can click on something and make it do something awesome, but no one thinks to click or tap on that because you never did that in a newspaper, you never did that before, you've never seen it before in your life. So doing something like making the text glow or making the circle kind of bounce around until you click on it is another sort of set of annotations that wouldn't necessarily be a text that says, hey, click here, but it's still, an extra thing that's not really part of the visualization, but lets you understand what you should do with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So I actually have more of a comment about the annotations than I guess a question. So a few years back, I did a project, and I thought I was super brilliant when it came to like the legend part of it, because I didn't want to put it was a weird stubborn thing where I didn't want to put a legend. So then I decided to color code, pretty much put the legend into my title text. So one category it was about the BART strike. So one category was BART, and the other one was the unions, and I colored BART as I think blue and the unions as orange, and then the rest of all of the visualizations used those two colors. And I was like, wow, I'm so brilliant! Like, people are gonna be able to get this, and I didn't even have to build a legend. They didn't. That was when I learned that legends are pretty important. So, thank you for making this.
I'd like to actually have one little comment on the annotations as well. This is stuff that collectively a couple of us have actually gone and had dinner and talked about that are part of the organizing community here. Honestly, annotations is a problem in computing right now. It's not just for us. If you think about it, there's been a ton of startups that have been trying to tackle this space, and each of them has failed year with year with year. Right now, the biggest one that you can think of is it's Graph Genius. They built an annotation layer for the web and they're trying to figure out that problem space. I think this is a really awesome, valuable problem to tackle. So that kind of thing is very interesting, but realize it's going to be a problem.
Guess who funded Genius?
All right.
Raymond had a question.
Oh.
Can you talk about how Netflix uses data visualization? Is it more customer facing? Is it more internal use?
Yeah. So I'm just in one little group at Netflix, so I can talk about how we use it. And most of our clients are internal, so it's working with the A/B testing teams, which is super interesting. A ton of data. You all have different experiences on your Netflix, and it's just little things to make the experience better, right? Like to learn from people, like what recommendations are better. Do we use this image or do we use that image? And so we build a platform internally for our analysts to look at the results of this data, right? And it's really interesting work. Our team currently is full-time on that right now, but we also have built another internal tool around visit analytics, looking at similar to Google Analytics type thing, but in-house built version of that with more of the metrics that we're interested in. But I can only talk to my team, so I'm sure there's much more going on in the company. I don't know of any non-internal projects that are data visualization right now. All right. Thank you very much.